Multiplying polynomial expressions and functions. A polynomial is a monomial, binomial, or trinomial, depending on the number of terms. A monomial has one non-zero term. Examples of a monomial are 4x to the 7th, x to the 3rd, negative 9x squared y to the 3rd, or negative 3. A binomial is two non-zero terms. Examples are 4x squared minus 9, or 5x to the 3rd plus x squared, or negative 2y plus 5. A trinomial has three non-zero terms. Examples are 5x to the 3rd minus 3x plus 6, or 3x squared plus 7x plus 2. Multiplication of monomials. In this example, find the product of 4x to the 3rd y squared parentheses negative 2x y to the 6th. Anytime you have a monomial in front of a parentheses, it means multiplication. So I can multiply 4 and negative 2 to get negative 8. X to the 3rd times x gives me x to the 4th. Y squared times y to the 6th gives me y to the 8th. So my answer is negative 8 x to the 4th y to the 8th. Multiplication of a monomial and a polynomial. In this example, we want to find the product 3wy squared times parentheses 4w squared minus 9wy plus 2y squared close parenthesis. We can use our distributive property, which means we'll have 3w y squared times 4w squared plus 3w y squared times negative 9wy plus 3w y squared times 2y squared. Going back to our first term, 3 times 4 is 12. W times w squared is w to the 3rd, and then the y squared comes down. For my second term, 3 times negative 9 is negative 27. W times w is w squared. Y squared times y is y to the 3rd. For my third term, 3 times 2 is 6. Bring down my w. Y squared times y squared is y to the 4th. So my final answer is 12w to the 3rd y squared minus 27w squared y to the 3rd plus 6w y to the 4th. Multiplication of two polynomials. To multiply two polynomials, multiply each term in the first polynomial by each term in the second polynomial. Then combine like terms if possible. So if we have a plus b in one parenthesis, c plus d in the other parenthesis, we can distribute our c plus d. So we have a times c plus d plus b times c plus d. That gives us a times c plus a times d plus b times c plus b times d. Another way to do this is by what's called the FOIL method. F stands for first, which would be a times c. O is for outside, which would be a times d. I stands for inside, which would be b times c. And L stands for last, which would be b times d. This gives you the same result as when you distribute. It's just a nice mnemonic to help you remember the order of multiplication. Either method works. In this example, find the product. Parenthesis x plus 6, parenthesis x plus 2. So I'm going to multiply x times x, which gives us x squared. Then I'm going to multiply x by 2, which gives us a positive 2x. Then multiply 6 times x, which gives us 6x, and then 6 times 2, which gives us 12. I can add my middle terms, so my final answer is x squared plus 8x plus 12. In this example, find the product of 3m minus 5n times 7m plus 2n. I will start by multiplying 3m times 7m, which gives us 21m squared, then 3m times 2n, which is a positive 6mn, then negative 5n times 7m, which gives us minus 35mn, then negative 5n times a positive 2n, which gives us minus 10n squared. Adding like terms, we have 21m squared minus 29mn minus 10n squared. In this example, find the product of 3x minus y times 2x squared plus 4xy minus 5. Starting with the 3x, multiply it by everything in the trinomial. So 3x times 2x squared is 6x to the third power. 3x times 4xy plus 12x squared y. Then 3x times minus 5 gives us minus 15x. Now we want to multiply everything by minus y. So negative y times 2x squared is negative 2x squared y. Negative y times 4xy gives us minus 4xy squared. Negative y times negative 5 gives us a positive 5y. Adding like terms, our final answer is 6x to the third plus 10x squared y minus 15x minus 4x y squared plus 5y. Our only like terms were 12x squared y minus 2x squared y. In this example, find the product. We have x squared minus 4x plus 1 times x squared minus 3x plus 2. Distribute the x squared first. X squared times x squared is x to the fourth. X squared times a negative 3x is negative 3x to the third. X squared times 2 is a positive 2x squared. Now distribute the minus 4. Negative 4x times x squared is negative 4x to the third. Negative 4x times negative 3x is a positive 12x squared. Negative 4x times a positive 2 is a negative 8x. Now multiplying everything by 1. 1 times x squared is positive x squared. 1 times negative 3 is negative 3x. 1 times 2 is a positive 2. Adding my like terms, I bring down my x to the fourth. Negative 3x to the third minus 4x to the third gives us negative 7x to the third. 2x squared plus 12x squared plus x squared is a positive 15x squared. Negative 8x minus 3x is negative 11x, and bring down the plus 2. Square of a binomial. A binomial squared is when you have two terms in a parenthesis with a square on the outside, or you have a binomial times itself. When you multiply a binomial by itself, we have a pattern. If I have x plus 3 squared, that's the same as x plus 3 times x plus 3. If we multiply, x times x is x squared, x times 3 is 3x, 3 times x is 3x, and 3 times 3 is 9. I have a 3x plus a 3x, which gives me x squared plus 6x plus 9. My middle terms are always doubled, so that gives us a pattern of a plus b parentheses squared equals a squared plus 2ab plus b squared, and that's the square of a sum. If you have the square of a difference, we have parentheses a minus b close parentheses squared equals a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. Your middle term will always carry the sign. In words, the square of a binomial equals the first term squared plus or minus twice the product of the two terms plus the second term squared. In this example, find the product x plus 7 parentheses squared. Using our formula, I square my first term, which gives me x squared. Then I use the sign in the middle, which is a plus. I multiply my two terms, x times 7, which is 7x times 2 gives us 14x. Then I square my last term, which is 7. 7 times 7 is 49, so I have plus 49. X plus 7 squared equals x squared plus 14x plus 49. In this example, find the product parenthesis 5t minus 4w close parenthesis squared. Our first term is 5t, so we take 5t and square it. Carry over the sign. Then I'm going to have 2 times my first term, which is 5t, times my second term, which is 4w, plus my last term squared, so 4w squared. 5t squared is 25t squared, minus 2 times 5 is 10, times 4 is 40, tw, plus 4w squared is 16w squared. Finding the product of binomial conjugates. Binomial conjugates are when you have the same numbers but different signs for your binomials. Parenthesis a plus b close parenthesis times parenthesis a minus b close parenthesis equals a squared minus b squared. In words, the product of two binomial conjugates is the difference of the square of the first term and the square of the second term. If we had x minus 3 times x plus 3, that would give us x times x, which is x squared, x times 3, which is a positive 3x, negative 3 times x, which is a minus 3x, negative 3 times 3, which is a minus 9. Our middle terms of 3x and minus 3x cancel, so our result is x squared minus 9, or the difference of two squares. In this example, find the product x plus 6 times x minus 6. Since we have binomial conjugates, I can just multiply x times x and 6 times minus 6, so my answer is x squared minus 36. In this example, find the product of parenthesis 3p minus 8q, my other parenthesis 3p plus 8q. I have binomial conjugates again. 3p times 3p is 9p to the second power minus 8q plus 8q minus 64q squared. So my answer is 9p squared minus 64q squared. Function notation. In this example, write the quadratic function in standard form. F of x equals x plus 6 parentheses squared. So for this problem, bring down my f of x equal. We can use our formula for squaring a binomial. X times x is x squared. X times 6 is 6x times 2 plus 12x. And then 6 squared is 36. So f of x equals x squared plus 12x plus 36. In this example, we want to write the quadratic function in standard form. F of x equals negative 3 parentheses x minus 5 squared minus 1. Our first step, bring down the f of x equals, bring down the negative 3 parentheses, and we want to find the result of x minus 5 squared. X squared is x squared. X times minus 5 times 2 is negative 10x. And negative 5 times negative 5 is a positive 25. Close my parenthesis, bring down my minus 1. Next, distribute the negative 3. Negative 3 times x squared is negative 3x squared. Negative 3 times negative 10x is a positive 30x. And negative 3 times 25 is a minus 75. Then bring down my minus 1. So my final answer, negative 3x squared plus 30x minus 76. Multiplying polynomial expressions and functions. Multiplication of monomials and polynomials. When I multiply a monomial by a polynomial, I have to distribute the monomial. When I multiply a binomial times a binomial, I have to distribute my first binomial, or I can use the FOIL method. Square of binomial, I can use the formula a plus b parentheses squared equals a squared plus 2ab plus b squared, or a minus b parentheses squared equals a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. When finding the product of binomial conjugates, our middle term always cancels out. So if I have a plus b times a minus b, my result is a squared minus b squared.